Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movies. What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Welcome to prime time, bitch. I'm sorry, I just had to do that. Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, I'm the SaWGuy, bringing you episode 21 on the whole Nightmare series. I know I did it on episode 20 because you guys beated that drum and told me that you wanted to do Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one. Well, you know what? I leave no stone unturned whatsoever. If I had to do the first one, you damn well know I had to talk about the whole thing. And I appreciate you guys, coming along for this whole journey. I mean, here we're at episode 21. This is part 1 of the Nightmare series. So, in this part 1, I'm basically going to break down to you part 2, which is Freddy's Revenge. Part 3, The Dream Warriors. Yeah, I just called back to that song, sorry. And then Dream Master, part 4. And also part 5, The Dream Child. That's a lot of fucking dreams, right? I know, it's crazy. But anyways, without further ado, let's get started. Because, we got a lot to cover. I had a lot of Freddy Krueger research that I've been piling up. I know I missed out on an episode last week. That's why I'm giving you guys a 2-part episode this week on this. So, thank you for enjoying. And let's get started. So, as I said already in episode 20, I won't get into it too much, but that Nightmare on Elm Street, was such a success. It was so great for everything that it was, that Wes Craven did, right? That movie came out in, November of 84, I believe. Quote me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. I might be wrong on that one, but it was literally right after it became so big that they said, you know what, fuck it, let's do a sequel. And this is where we get into with Freddy's Revenge, part 2. Now, when they started doing the sequel, Wes Craven was just like, I do a one and done. I don't do sequels. So they couldn't get Wes Craven in. They got these other guys to write a story, and they got a fresh new face to do the director. And basically with New Line, what they set out to do was, hey, we're going to do it. We made this amount of money, but let's do it with this amount of the budget. Try to extend everything, right? And when they did that, they basically figured, okay, well, if we're going to start all fresh, might as well let's replace Robert Englund and get a stunt guy. So that was the first wrong move that they started. They started filming it, and basically the whole story surrounded this boy. Well, I can't say guy, but this boy. And his name was Jesse, and it centered around the whole Nightmare on Elm Street house is what they decided to call it. And it was basically Nancy's house from the first one. And so anyways, when they started filming, jumping back to Robert Englund, they filmed half of this movie with the stuntman, and they just said, nah, we can't do it. We can't do it. Because the stuntman was just very bulky. There's some test footage. Actually, you can see it on this documentary called Never Sleep Again. It's really good. It's about a 4-hour documentary, but it covers a whole Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. But anyways, if not, you could always check it on YouTube. And he was completely different. He was not as smooth, not as creepy as Robert Englund. He was more bulky, just, and they said, fuck it. So they ended up paying Robert Englund his money that he wanted, and it wasn't really much a matter of money. It was more or less miscommunication. But anyways, they got Robert Englund, and the whole story surrounded around this kid named Jesse. They just moved into the Nancy's house, the Nightmare on Elm Street house, and he started having these weird dreams, and everything started around him being odd. And the whole story centers around Freddy Krueger trying to take over this kid. He wants to try to take over his dreams, then his life, and eventually break out of him so he can come out to the real world. So it was actually a pretty cool, interesting story, and just the way that it was executed, I think a lot of people have issues with it, and I'll get into it in a bit. But basically, the whole story follows, he has a bad dream on a bus. Robert Englund's actually driving the bus, which is kind of funny. He doesn't have his makeup on. But then he wakes up, has a bad dream, then he goes to school, and I don't know if it was new school, or I think it was he was going into a new school. But anyways, he has issues with his PE coach, and who doesn't? You know, most of them, they're assholes. We all been there, right? And he becomes friends with this guy who ends up fucking with him and ends up being a bully. And so the coach makes him run laps, do all that stuff. And then he befriends this cute girl that he likes, right? And it's just, she's the popular girl, and he is kind of like this goofy kid. So it kind of followed a lot of the stuff from the 80s that was coming out. You know, goofy kids, you know, they in the end, they get the hot chick that they fall in love with, right? It followed that whole premise. And basically the whole story is just like, she wants to get to know him, but then he's kind of like pushing her away. And then the whole story goes on where they end up becoming friends. They start studying, you know. And then later on, you know, Freddy Krueger just starts fucking with him more and more and more. And eventually leads into his plan that, hey, I want to take over you. And the whole story goes that the chick ends up having well, I wouldn't say a birthday party. It was more like a summer bash party because they had a pool party. But it was funny because it happened at dark. You know, and then they waited till the parents went to sleep. And then after that, then they just got all fucking loud and everything. The typical 80s, right? You had to live it to understand it. And Freddy Krueger, he broke the dream rules, which is, well, I wouldn't say dream rules. I would say the Wes Craven rule. That Freddy Krueger comes out into the real world and basically is like, these are all my children now. And while he's doing that, he's basically trying to mess with Jesse, and he's trying to get his groove on with his lady friend. That don't work out, so he goes to his friend's house, the bully that he ended up being friends with. And, you know, just from there, that's where Freddy Krueger eventually fully comes out and kills his friend, leads him into a boiling room. And his friend, I keep forgetting her name, but she looks like Meryl Streep. That was the whole reason why they cast her, because she looked like Meryl Streep. And, well, anyways, they lead onto a boiler room, and she basically tells Jesse, hey, you could fight it, you could beat him. And she basically makes out with Jesse, and he's like in Freddy Krueger makeup and stuff. It's Robert Englund. And then you see that Freddy Krueger just basically dissolves out of the way, and everything's good, or so you think. And then he gets on the bus, and it's the same thing that happens again as in the beginning. It repeats itself, right? That's part 2. So, real quick on part 2. It's a different story. It's very unique. For me, I wouldn't say it's one of my top favorites, but it has to be included, at least in everybody's top 3 or top 5. And there's so many different things for it. And the controversy that's surrounding this film is the fact that they did a lot of homophobic, like, winks in there. You know, they really put a lot of it in there. Couple of scenes. You know, he's a young boy. And he actually is the first male Scream Queen, which is actually pretty cool. You don't see too many horror films where the main serial killer, he's chasing after a boy versus a girl, because it follows that whole vulnerability thing, right? But the fact that he did it for a guy was just like, whoa, okay, this is a little different, but we can roll with this. But then the writers, they put in stuff in there to kind of like, haha, we put in jokes in there, right? Which is kind of fucked up. And what's funny is that nobody recognized it. Nobody got it until after they released the film and said, oh shit, we put the wrong stuff in here, you know? And I laugh about it because there's a scene where he's, you know, cleaning his room, dancing, and then he hits his ass to close the drawer, you know? He's playing with this little toy or whatever, and it's like this. He's dancing, then puts it right here like he's doing his thing, and then pop. You know, it's just, it's random. It's like, what the hell? And then, you know, his friend comes in and walks in on that. And then after that, they start cleaning his room or whatever because they're still settling and moving in. Then, you know, he asks, hey, let's clean out my closet. And then in the closet, they have a game called Probe. I mean, there's just so much subjectives in there. And nobody really picked up on it until the Europeans did. And that's why this film really, like, made a lot of money, because Europeans went crazy. They saw all the subjective, you know, jokes in there. And I wouldn't call it so much jokes, but it's just all the little winks. And for me, I got nothing against it. I actually thought it was kind of funny how they did some of the scenes, because, you know, it's like, what? They actually put that in there? But, you know, I think it was one of those films that really broke the barrier for everybody and made it more. It didn't put boundaries on a horror film, which was cool. You know, it followed the stereotypical rules. Obviously, it broke Wes Craven's rule, but it followed that whole thing with it, you know. And honestly, like, that's why I like that film. You know, not out of all of them, but I like it really good just because it broke the barrier. It basically did a lot of bold moves that you didn't see in horror films, especially in the 80s, the heyday of it, you know? And for what they did, they had a lot of guts to do that shit. That's why I was just like, whoa, really? You know? One of my favorite scenes is he goes to sleep. He wakes up, and the kid, he walks into a bar, and out of all the bars he goes to, it's S&M. And then he ends up seeing his coach dressed in S&M gear and says, hey, you can't, well, basically grabs his hand when he asks for a drink, takes him back to the school and makes him run laps. And then after that, he says, okay, hit the showers. Well, as the coach goes into the gym room, or the coach's room, all of a sudden, Freddy starts messing with the coach, but then he opens the door and all these balls are hitting him. And I just thought it was funny. I'm like, that's, to me, that's not scary if balls are coming at me like that. But then they show the scene where, you know, it kind of got a little brutal where they take him in the shower and they mess with him and everything. And it's just, yeah. But number 2 was, I don't know. It's not everyone's favorite, I shall say. But it's memorable for all the subcontext that's in there. And, you know, it's, the main thing that I got out of it was not so much that. The first thing that I remember when I saw it was, whoa, what the fuck? They changed Freddy Krueger. And they actually did. The original makeup artist that did the original Nightmare on Elm Street, they didn't have enough time to book a gig to come back to do part 2 because they didn't know if they were going to do a part 2 or not, you know, until after the first one got released. So they had new makeup guys that came in, and what they basically did, they redesigned Freddy. They gave him a witch-like nose where it was like very big and sticks down. They changed his eyes from his normal eye color, blue or hazel, and they changed it to like solid brown, gave him more sinister looking look. And they changed his teeth. If you ever watch it, or if you haven't watched it, or if you go back and actually watch it, pause it and just pay attention to it, you know, because they did the whole makeup different, right? Interesting enough, too, the claw that was used in the original one was used here in this one as well, part 2. The only thing is, they had like 2 of them, or I think they had 3, and one of them got stolen. And after that, then that's when they started like guarding the shit out of this claw. And you'll see that the claw ends up being on Evil Dead 2. Yeah, it's Evil Dead 2. It's Evil Dead 2 where Ash goes into the shack, and then you see it hanging like right above the door and everything. Kind of cool little winks, you know. But anyways, that's all of Freddy Revenge in, you know, summed up in like 5 minutes. Probably a little bit longer than that, but yeah. But anyways, here comes part 3 now. Part 3 was really the one that kind of got Hollywood-ish, I guess you could say. And it's because part 2, it did okay in theaters in America, and it was fucking huge in the European market. But they said, all right, it's still big. Now we got a franchise. Let's get to work. So they got to work, and they started making part 3. There was a lot of little odds and ends on this because Wes Craven agreed to come back. He was going to write the story, write the screenplay. He was going to direct. And I don't know if it was an issue with money, if there was an issue with creative control, things like that. He backed out. They got somebody else to write the story, which was pretty cool how they came up with it. Then Wes Craven came back, and he was basically kind of like the screenplay writer, and he had made the adjustments and stuff, and he kind of got his hands into this one. Not a whole lot, but a little bit, right? So part 3, you bring back Nancy from the original, and you bring back her dad, and basically this whole story follows around a bunch of kids who are being fucked with by Freddy, and all the parents still in Springwood, they just tune it out. You know, they're either into their own lives, they're drug addicts, and they're suffering from that guilt of how they killed somebody and just, you know, don't know how to live. You know, it's just they live a wild life. So they don't pay attention to any of these kids. They put these kids not in a mental institution, but more or less kind of like similar to an asylum, right? And that's when Freddy really kind of gets to them and starts fucking with them. And part 3 was really cool because you had a great soundtrack with Dokken, who was one of the biggest metal bands at that time, hair metal bands. And at the same time, they pushed the effects on this. The director that came back the new director they got for this, he was more an effects guy. and he wanted to spend basically 90% of the budget all just on effects, which came out really good. You know, there's some scenes where Freddy Krueger's a puppet. He comes out. Some of the kill scenes were just really cool, like how the kid pulls up like a puppet and he's walking around. But anyways, this whole story followed how Nancy suffered from the first one and how she went to school, became a therapist, a dream therapist, and things like that, and how she's trying to work with these kids and find out if Freddy's coming back. And then little by little, each of these kids, they all start to fade away. My favorite line I said at the beginning of this video, "Welcome to prime time." Everybody remembers that one. You know, how he picks up the chick and then puts her in the TV. But it was, part 3, he got a little bit more relaxed, got a little bit more corny. He didn't get to be more sinister, I guess. But this is the film that really kind of gave Freddy his more joking side. More, I'm going to toy with you like a cat and mouse kind of thing, right? The whole story basically follows Nancy as she's trying to teach these kids. These kids, little by little, are dying off till it's like the last 4. And then she basically, you know, shows them, like, hey, if you go to sleep with me, I could show you the dream world and how to live it. And she basically shows them that in your dreams, you control it. You could beat Freddy. You could beat Freddy. And as she's trying to get help, you know, the doctors, they don't believe her. And then she tries to get help from her dad to figure out, you know, how can we stop Freddy Krueger. It gives a little bit more about his backstory, like how he was the bastard of 1,000 maniacs because his mom was a nun. And she basically got locked in an asylum and got raped. That's all it said. It didn't get in too much, which was cool. It added more mystique, more sinister, right? And they basically said, okay, you have to basically look for his bones and bury him in holy ground and basically put his body to rest. And that's what this whole film was trying to do, was trying to find Freddy Krueger, put his body to rest. That way he's done, right? And in this film, he had some big name actors. He had some decent ones. Patricia Arquette, it was her first gig. Lawrence Fishburne, yeah. Every time I think of Lawrence Fishburne, I think of, you know, Pee-wee's Playhouse. That's where I always remember him from. But I know, I can't remember if he did Pee-wee's Playhouse or he did this one first. It's one of the two. But anyways, he's in it. Obviously, you know, Nancy's back, her dad's back. And the way that this story was written, you could tell Wes Craven, he babied this one, you know. Not as much as the first one, but he made sure that they didn't break any Wes Craven rules. He didn't come out in the real world or anything like that. But the sad thing about this one, they kill off Nancy, and then the 3 kids, they end up being the Dream Warriors, and they end up, you know, saving the day after, you know, Nancy's dad, after he gets killed. They bury the body and everything, and the ending is kind of left open. And, you know, the guy, I guess he was one of the psychiatrists that was there that was helping Nancy in this film. He was helping her, and he basically kept seeing this ghost nun, and he was like, you know, trying to tell this nun, tell her, hey, sister, you know, I wanted to think, and then he sees her gravestone, and it leaves part 3 kind of like open-ended, which, obviously, we know where this is going. Part 3 is the one that got really famous, because then you had the Dawkins video. I think at the same time, that's when Fresh Prince or Will Smith came out and did that rap song that I put on some of my teasers. There's a nightmare on my street. That one. What was it too? And then I think also that movie became so popular that they basically greenlit and gave Freddy Krueger his own show called, what was it? New Nightmares or something like that. I wrote it down. That's why I'm just like, what the hell? But basically, what it was, that movie got so popular, he got his own TV show. Kind of like Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Well, anyways, since it got so big, we know where New Line was going with this one, right? Then they had to bring a 4th one, The Dream Master, which this is, out of all the Freddy films, this is the one that made the most money as a Nightmare on Elm Street film. I'm not including Freddy vs. Jason because that's different, but this one made the most money out of all of them. And when they did this one, they got the Die Hard director. I forgot his name, but he's this Finnish guy. He came from Finland. They tell the whole story on that documentary. And basically what it was is that he came in and said, hey, I want to do this work. And New Line Cinema, you know, they were still continuing that trend where, okay, we did the last one for, you know, 10 million. Let's go ahead and do this one for 7 million, and we'll see if we make, you know, X amount of dollars out of it, you know, triple our profit. because that's what they do for horror films. They push the boundaries on it, right? So anyways, part 4 comes out, and what sucks is that they replaced Patricia Arquette. Everybody loved Patricia Arquette because she basically was the Dream Warrior. They basically handed her the torch. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it was money or whatever, and I don't even know if they've ever announced why she never came back for part 4. But they said that on part 3, because she was still raw, the director kind of got on her about it, so I can understand that. Okay. So either way, you follow the original 3 kids, and Patricia Arquette's character, Tina, she gets replaced by this other chick, Tuesday Night, who doesn't look like her, but she fits the bill, right? She could play the character really good, and that was a good recast if they had to do it, and they did it okay. But anyways, part 4, it still followed that trend, basically what Friday the 13th movies were doing. If you're a survivor at the end of one film, you bet your ass you're going to die in the next one, and within the first 5 minutes. So they killed off all the kids. They killed off Kincaid. They killed off, I think his name was Rodney. He was the one with the long ponytail hair and everything, and he couldn't speak. But, and then they killed Tina last, and then as Tina was being killed, she was friends with, her boyfriend. Wait, I'm going to sound stupid when I say it like this. Her boyfriend, she was friends with her boyfriend's sister, right? And her boyfriend's sister had dream powers as well. That's kind of weird. But yeah, she had dream powers as well, where she could daydream and imagine things and twist things up. So she gets into the dream because Tina brings her in and said, use my powers. And basically gives her all the dream powers from, the original 3 from part 3. And Freddy Krueger takes them over. And this whole story basically goes that Freddy Krueger, he starts fucking with all of the new kids now, right? It wasn't he wants to get out and escape. He just wants to do whatever damage. And with part 4, I love because there was some, iconic scenes. There was obviously the pizza with the meatball souls. There was the tough chick who basically would like to work out, and then when everybody started dying, then she's like, I could take them out. And I don't have a fear of bugs, but I fucking hate cockroaches. And, they played onto that in this, because her character hated cockroaches as well. So Freddy Krueger basically turned into a cockroach. Oh, you check in, but you don't check out. And, yeah. So, part 4 really stepped up on the effects. They got a little bit more practical. CGI wasn't really too big, so they had a little CGI scenes, when they showed the souls and shit like that. But bottom line, this one basically was very similar to the Dream Warriors. It was just basically new sets of kids. They killed off the original survivors, and, let's go with this story. And it played off into the whole fact of, Amanda coming back, Freddy Krueger's mom, and it played into a little bit of that story. But not so much. It was just, I don't know, for me, I enjoyed it just because it was still Freddy Krueger. And obviously, if you're a fan, it doesn't matter if the sequels suck or not. You're still going to say they're badass. I still say that with a lot of films. But anyways, part 4 was okay. It was good. It was decent. And I don't know. It wasn't different like Freddy's Revenge, but it followed, it had its downtime with it. Case in point, I'm going to bring up one of the death scenes was Tina's boyfriend. He was into karate because, it was the late 80s, early 90s. Everybody was all into karate films and shit. You had to live it to understand it, right? So anyways, there's a scene in his dream that he goes to sleep and he's in a dojo and he's fighting Freddy, but he's fighting an invisible ghost of Freddy. So, the acting's a little cheesy, okay, but just the fact of really? But later on in the film, you see where they spend the money on the effects. I guess originally they had it planned out where Freddy was going to be all decked out in some karate outfit or whatever. And that's how they were going to do it, So that's why I was like, okay. But part 4, The Dream Master, it wasn't bad. And you'll see why it was the highest grossing film once you watch it. I know Dream Warriors was still probably up there. It's still one of the better ones. But yeah. But then, since the success of this one got so big, they decided, fuck it, let's do a part 5. So they did a part 5, right? And out of all these sequels, since the first one, they did it year after year. And it was basically like, okay, the first one came out November 9th, and next year, November 2nd, that's when part 2 came out, and so forth. And they kept pushing it back. So basically, instead of having a full year, they had, like 11 and a half months or 11 months. They were just cranking this shit out just because, it was so popular. They had to, So anyways, we get to one of my other oddball ones. I know I get a lot of shit about it because I tell people it's one of my favorite ones, right? And I like this one because I would see this one all the time on TV. Fuck it, I still see this one on TV a lot. But The Dream Child. It was such a... This is the downfall one right here. This is because this film didn't do too good in theaters. They still did a part 6, but they basically had to end the series and kind of kill it off a little bit, and you'll hear about it later on once I do the second part. But anyways, this whole story basically followed all the survivors from part 4. And, but there's a little twist. Alice and her boyfriend from part 4, they ended up, hooking up. She gets pregnant, and then they graduate high school, and, that's when their whole life starts to develop and everything. And then Freddy Krueger starts running amok. And he basically can run amok on them because he's feeding off of the fetus's dreams. Which is like, oh, okay, see, I like that concept. That's pretty cool because he could fuck with them as much as he wants, and there's not a damn thing anybody could do about it. So this whole story surrounded around Alice, again, from part 4, and basically said, okay, well, I'm going to keep fucking with your baby. Then she would have these weird, crazy dreams about seeing her baby, and the baby's name was Jacob, and how Freddy was in the baby's dream telling the baby, like, oh, she never even wanted you, and how you became friends with the baby and stuff. And it was kind of a little weird. Like, it opened up your mind a lot more, But it's just, I don't know. For me, I liked it because it was different. It was odd. There was a lot of good death scenes in it for me. They didn't push the boundary too much in the effects, other than there's a bike scene where her boyfriend's riding a bike, and then it just turns into a machine and shit. And yeah, that was cool. I remember seeing that. But part 5, it didn't do too well in theaters for obvious reasons. A lot of the promotions were Freddy Krueger, where he's having a baby and stuff like that, and it just played off on that in the media. And a lot of people were like, okay, this is stupid. And everybody who I know is a Nightmare fan, even to the ones that voted for Nightmare on Elm Street for the last episode, they all tell me their least favorite, it's not part 2, it's part 5, The Dream Child. And it's just because they thought the idea was dumb, or stupid. And I love the idea of what they did, how they played off on the baby's dream. That's cool. That's really cool how they did that. It's just, for me, I don't think that was executed well enough, because then they tied into how they defeated Freddy. And the way they defeated Freddy is they got Amanda involved. Who's Amanda? That was Fred Krueger's mom, the nun. And she gets involved and basically combines with Freddy and locks him away and everything like that. And then that's the end of Freddy. And then she ends up having the baby. She names the baby Jacob from her dreams from when she did it. And with this one, you had a lot of corny ones in there, corny scenes. You had one of the characters, he was a big comic nerd and would draw on comics and stuff. And then basically he was brought into Freddy's world as, a comic character. And he basically realized, oh, I can make it into this character that I made, I forgot the name of him. I've seen it so many times, I forgot the freaking name. It's just because the camera's on me, I guess, But anyways, then Freddy turns around and says, I'm Super Freddy, ha ha. And they're just, they garnered this one, I believe, more towards the teeny boppers, the new teeny boppers, the ones that grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, that's when that whole transition change came about. And you could see out of every one of these films where the 80s was huge and where it started to kind of die off and go into the 90s a little bit, But overall, for those films, from part 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you get up to 5, The Dream Child was, how do I say it? If I compare it for me, I say The Dream Child was like Saw 6. Not everybody went to go see Saw 6. It did poor in the box office. And the next one was the last film that was supposed to end everything. And that's basically what happened with this, With the whole Nightmare on Elm Street, after this one, they said, okay, now we're going to come back and we're going to do a sixth one, but we should completely end it, right? Or do they? You know, I mean, for the first 5 films, I enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about it, because I know it's a long series and everything like that. And I'm just about out of time for this first part of episode. So tune in to part 2 of episode 21. And then that way I'll go over part 6, part 7, and even the remake. Dun dun dun. Dare I say, right? But anyways, thanks for everybody for tuning in. And I'll catch you all in part 2, okay?
Bow down to the, bow down